Jerky's Machine, most entertaining channel you've ever seen. He's always making lots of interesting scenes for you to watch on YouTube.
I feel like I've said this before, but we're just about finished getting this amp ready to rock. In our last episode, Craig finished all the remaining chassis prep work, and the end result is absolutely stunning. This episode focuses on wrapping up some outstanding electronic component installs. The effects loop board needs to be wired up, screwed into the chassis, and soldered into the circuit. Craig then gets busy with the front panel installation and bringing the pilot light, the switches, and the controls to life. We'll also get a sneak peek at what the Shirky will look like when we're all done.
I wasn't sure exactly if I was going to be able to solder on these or not, but yeah, so I'm not going to use those little clip things that they had on here. I'm just going to solder right to them.
Straight to it.
Yeah. I checked that out, so the power switch works and everything, and then connected to 5 and 6 will be your pilot light. Yep. Kind of working on your effects send right now, your effects loop right now.
Mm-hmm.
Want to get the wires flying off of it so that all we got to do is just put it on here, tighten the little nuts, and then we'll be able to connect the wires to where they go. One of them to the treble pot for the to send to the effects loop, and then the return comes back on the board right over here. So that's that. I want to have shielded cable running between those, and my first go at that didn't work out quite right, so I'm gonna have to go at it again. I want to get the send and return wires on there right now. So this is the shielded cable that came with the effects loop kit. And so what you want to do is you want to have one end of the shielded cable connected to ground, and then the other one just gets heat shrinked off. And that provides shielding for the circuit because it's going to be running across the top of some of our power supply stuff, so we don't want to have that getting into the signal. Got that mounted on there.
That looks fantastic.
Yeah, that'll look pretty nice. I just like the color combo of everything on this. So here's the sealed pot that I got for the VVR. What it came with is just a regular alpha open pot. I'll get it out of the pack here so you can see. And I don't really know exactly how much this matters, but if you look down in here, you can see that that it's just open like a regular old potentiometer. And what I don't want to have happen is any kind of moisture or grit or anything to get down inside of there and cause the wiper to ground out on the case. I'm assuming that would probably be a bad thing, like 4th of July thing. So anyways, the way that it came though, it's easy to get this potentiometer off the board. And so what I have made the decision to do is to go ahead and mount just the board itself. It'll look something like this because the IGBT chip will get mounted in these 3 pads right here, and then you bend it at a 90-degree angle, and then the actual chip is what's holding it down onto the chassis, so it'll be up on its side like this. And then I also got some little heat sinks here. So the heat sink can either go inside the chassis or it can go on the outside of the chassis. That'll pull the heat off of the chip, and so that gets isolated from the chassis with this silicone pad here. I'm sorry, mica pad. So we put some thermal grease down this little thing that came with it here, little thermal grease. And we spread that real thin and evenly onto this pad. Then the pad lays down in the chassis, and the chip gets mounted through a hole here, and then the screw goes to the other side for the heat sink, and that'll pull a sufficient amount of heat off of it when it's soaking a lot of power, because those things get very hot. So we want to keep it as cool as possible. Yeah, the pot will be over in here, and as you can see, it would have just been hanging too close to all this other stuff here. I mean, I could have put it upside down like this. That would have been fine, but then I wouldn't have had anywhere to heat sink the chip to. Mm-hmm. So it made sense to me, since there's no audio going on this end of the board to speak of, especially up on this side here where we've got all the power supply stuff, to just run the wires and route them along this side of the board over to the little printed circuit board. For right now, what I'm going to do though is concentrate on getting the leads flying off of the. See, I got the B+ wire, which will go directly to one of the power socket. I mean, to one of the preamp sockets that has filtered power, and that would be right here on the layout diagram that I made. So I want to get the shielded wires going now, and hopefully this time I'll get it right, so I don't have to keep soldering and desoldering on it, because printed circuit boards don't like that sort of thing.
Nor does Craig.
No. What I did before was I just stuck this down in here. That's the ground for the board. There's another ground on this corner right here, and that'll be the ground that I run to the chassis. The out pad I'm going to ground to the actual board ground. Mm-hmm. And then the in pad will be grounded at the end where the pots are on the front of the chassis. So they'll essentially be grounded in the same place, but it's for the shield, so it doesn't really matter particularly where that's grounded, because it's not in circuit. And I just want to make sure that there's no continuity between the two, because that would just short it to ground. Okay, there isn't as of this point. What I did last time was I came in so close to the shield right here that I think once I hit it with the soldering iron, it melted this jacket a little bit and caused the two to make connection. This time I'm going to keep it a little further away. Hopefully that'll, and you know what, I can use my little heat sink thing right here too. That should keep the heat away from it. Let's get a little length of this heat shrink stuff. And then what I'll do is I'll come back with a larger piece of heat shrink that came with the kit and slip that over the top right here and push it on. So let me go ahead and solder these in. The thing that most people start with before they'll start the guitar amp building thing is building pedals, and so I made a couple little assortment of pedals, and I just never really enjoyed building those though as much as this. It's just not, it's not as enjoyable to me. It's because I have fat fingers, and getting inside those little tiny boxes drives me nuts. I've made some distortion boxes, overdrive, clean boost. I haven't done any time-based effects at all. I'd probably, if I was going to do that, I'd probably get a kit, because that way you get everything that's, I mean, you just drop it onto the board and solder. But I've made my own little circuit boards. You can get a little kit from Radio Shack or from an electronics parts place.
Yeah.
It comes with copper clad board. It's got copper clad to both sides of the board. You use like a Sharpie, or there's this plastic type stuff that melts off once you put alcohol over it. Once you put it in the etchant and agitate the bath, eventually everything that's not covered by either the Sharpie ink or the other plasticky stuff, I think it's kind of like the same thing as like toner from a laser printer. once all the other desired amount of copper melts off of the board, then you take it off, rinse it with water, and then take your alcohol, and then what you're left with is your traces for the to solder to. It's fun to goof around with, but I don't know. I just don't enjoy it as much as I enjoy working on the tube amp stuff. Hopefully this will keep enough heat off of it so it won't melt the wire like it did last time. There's just not very much room to work with here. I don't want to burn any of the components. There we go. That looks pretty good. Perfect. So now what I'll do is I'll slip over a piece of this. That'll cover this and keep it from making contact with anything underneath. Probably about like so. And we got plenty of wire going through that side. There we go. That looks good. Solid connections there. Now let me just make sure that we don't have any continuity between the two. Excellent. Just gonna bundle these two together. That'll kind of hold it away from the B+ line. Yeah, I really need those right at the moment. Just hold it in place here. Roughly like that. And then let's see, input volume treble. So I'm going to just give us a little extra length here. It's going to get its power from the very last node of power in the power supply, which is your first preamp tube and the cathode follower tube, which is the second tube in line, second preamp tube in line. And so there's a tab on that cathode follower, like I showed you a little bit earlier, which is tied directly to the last in line of the power supply. And so I'm just going to go ahead and come out. That's the power to the effects loop board. And so I'm just going to go ahead and solder that right there, and then it comes from here to the socket. A little bit more there. Shoot, we got a nice little piece left over here, and we can use that from the input jack to the first preamp tube. I usually like to shield from the plate side of the phase inverter, or the other side of the plate side of the phase inverter, to the power tubes. That's kind of like the output to the power tubes right here. So I'll have plenty of shielded wire left over to do that. And if this isn't a long enough piece, then I've got some more.
I'd like to take a moment to thank Craig for the idea of putting my name on this amp. It's an added touch of personalization I just wouldn't have thought of. Thanks, Craig.
I want to test this light and make sure that number 5 and 6 are the ones that actually power the light. What I used, though, was the Hammond replacement transformer schematic, and it shows this as a 120 volt secondary. So I'm assuming that that's what lit the rocker switch on the Marshall. So what I want to do, since I've got the 120 volt, just the primary connected here, and I've got the switch wired to it, is to go ahead and wire this up and put the front panel on, screw a couple of things to it to hold it in place, and then connect it to power and see what happens. I did already test this, and it is indeed 120 volts coming off of these two. Okay. So I just want to make sure that our power light is going to work.
So Craig, we look like we're at the point here where it's really just an assembly job that's left.
That's what we've got left, just assembly. What I'm going to do is I'm going to run all the leads off of the sockets. I have the power tube ones over there, but this goes in first. It's just not cooperating right at the moment. That gets bolted in. It'll have leads coming off of it, which I'll kind of bend this way so that I can keep them out of the way of putting the board in. Once this is bolted in and I have all my leads sticking up, then I'll be able to drop this into place, the circuit board, and then I'll be able to take my pliers, little needle nose thingies here, and be able to grab the wire that I need and put it to each one of the spots where they need to go.
And drop a bit of solder on.
Yeah, so I won't need to get my soldering iron near the socket anymore because I'll already have the leads flying off of that long enough to go to the board, and I'll probably leave. There'll be some wasted wire because I'll be snipping off bits of it that are too long. It's better to have it too long than to have it too short and go, oh, okay, great. Mm-hmm. Now I got to pull the whole thing back apart. And then I'll do the same thing with the power tube sockets. I'll have the leads flying off of there to go to the points where they need to go onto the board. And then I need to wire the output jacks and the output transformer. There will be 2 leads that come off of the output transformer primary that go to the power tubes. Yeah, we're getting actually very close to really having this thing ready to power up and plug a guitar into. Shouldn't take too much longer. But first, I'd like to make sure that our light works. All right, stand back. Nice. All right.
A success story. Indeed it is. And we haven't even gotten to hear this thing yet. But I'm sure it's evident the level of quality and care Craig puts into this craft of his. So I have a lot of confidence that he's going to nail it with the tone. Oh, speaking of tone, did I say we haven't heard this thing yet? We have now. That's right, folks. It's alive. We'll see you next time.
It's Shirky's Machine, most entertaining channel you've ever seen. He's always making lots of interesting scenes for you to watch on YouTube.